I want to pause and just again say, Jacob, how proud I am of you for all that you have done so well today. It just goes to show what you put in is what you get out. The quality of your leadership, and I look at our other B'nai Mitzvah, both before and after, is a product of a community with a commitment to invest and parents who invest in strong Jewish education. The skills you display this morning, Jacob, are deep enough that will allow you to come back and read Torah again, as two of your friends did this morning, are deep enough that you will be able to go to synagogues around the world and open a prayer book and be somewhat at home. Much, much more at home than if you hadn't put in that time. We get out what we put in, and the times they are a-changin'. I was going to say no deposit, no return, but we don't get bottles anymore that we return. I do see people collecting those aluminum cans, but you don't pay per se. So even an expression, no deposit, no return, which rings familiar to some of us, Jacob, you might not understand it fully because we live in a different commercial setting. You, through your mitzvah project, were able to create a website, and through that website, which I went and looked at, you were able to harvest tzedakah, charitable contributions, in ways that a bar bat mitzvah would not have done 10 years ago. In terms of creating the website, let alone 20 years ago. I mention that in terms of the times they are a-changin', because changing times is anxiety-making. There are those who say you can understand the political tensions of our day, not necessarily between have and have-nots, but those who see technological change as a positive versus those who see it as a negative. But I focus on that not to discuss politics, but to discuss Torah. I was reading this morning a book by Rabbi Harold Kushner that I bring to your attention. Rabbi Harold Kushner, the well-known rabbi who wrote the bestseller, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. His most recent book of just last year are 9 things that he has learned from life. And the first chapter, the first thing he learned in life is that what he learned in rabbinical school was not going to be useful for him in the pulpit necessarily. Because he said when he got into the pulpit, the answers he had been taught in rabbinical school weren't necessarily responding to the questions that people were asking him. And that those questions were always changing and evolving. I noted today, only partly tongue-in-cheek, that when you open the Torah and you pick any one of those laws, you cannot know what those laws really mean. Some, on the surface, are very elevating. The care for the poor. Others are extremely disturbing. But even there, on both counts, we deal with complexity. Oh, if only we had a cookbook that told us exactly what to do and to say that it was God who gave us the clarity of direction. But do know that is not how the rabbis read the Torah, because they read the Torah through debate. I just went to my office to get the 2 volumes. Whoops. It's actually 1 volume, but when it got translated into English, it's so much material that it turns out to be 2 volumes. On those 5 verses that Jacob read, here's the law. When a man dies and he and his wife have no children, what are the obligations of the family? Now, in that context of the Torah, for a man to die with no offspring is not to have continuity. It is almost as if he never lived. And so in the Bible, there are those 5 verses that say that the wife needs to have children with his next of kin. In the Torah, you cannot marry your wife's sister, even in a polygamous setting. This is an exception. You marry the brother needs to who may already be married, a polygamous society, with his sister-in-law, so that his brother's memory can endure. But those 5 verses, you might think, well, one, it's pretty kind of weird law. There's a lot of questions you might ask. Does he stop sleeping with her once they have a child? Or does she become a full wife? What are her rights? What if that woman has had a child with a previous husband? What if she too can't bear children? What then becomes the responsibility? Hence, 2 volumes of debate edited in the year 500 in Baghdad, the Babylonian Talmud. Now you might think, well, that's all kind of quaint, or if not absurd. Why is it relevant? It's only in the last 40 years, I should say only in the last 25 years, that a real question has come up. Can you have children with a surrogate? If a couple cannot have children, can you rent a womb? Can a woman be hired? Or is that like organ donation? Something personal that should not be done. Or maybe it can be done if it's voluntary. Or maybe you can pay for it. Because to rent a body, to enable the birth of a child, maybe that's a positive. That's the giving children the blessing of a child they could not otherwise have. So the question of surrogacy did not exist in the time of the Talmud any more than the use of the internet on Shabbat. They were categories that did not exist. And yet, in the debates among rabbis over the last 25 years, and which there is debate, both sides have been represented in terms of if you can pay a surrogate, if you can use a surrogate, making reference to values found in this Masechet of Yevamot. The idea that to perpetuate life for those who can't do so has a place, that it's a blessing to have children, and in this case, to use medical technology. That question of the permissibility of having surrogates is only to say the times are changing. There are new medical questions, but those medical questions come in a context of a conversation across generations as to what does God expect from us if God is the parent of all and we are to be good and even holy. Last Sunday night, there were 500 people in this room hearing a heated conversation on settlements in Israel. Some people told me, I'm not coming because that guy Peter Beinart, I don't want to hear what he has to say. He was the fellow saying that Israel will not be a democratic state if it holds on to settlements. Other people came up to me and afterwards and said regarding Danny Gordis, who says that Israel's security comes first, he wasn't far enough to the right. One state is fine. You needed somebody to argue that. I did advertise it as right of center and left of center rather than the poles. I was so honored that CBI could host the first debate on settlements in Orange County in any synagogue. There is no more topic of importance than Israel and its future. And that it should not be discussed publicly is not Jewish. I wish life was simple and there wasn't a need to have debates. But that's the only way you gain wisdom. I shared some of the emails I received after Sunday night. One person said, as I listened to one presenter, I thought he was right. And then I listened to the other presenter and I thought he was right. Another person said, the only thing Peter Beinart and I had in common is we were both Jews. I was so upset. Another person wrote and said, I couldn't sleep that night because I was so troubled by the settlements, and when I talked to my children about it the next day, I only became more upset to know how problematic it is for them. Which is only to say that for Jews to discuss both what God expects from us ethically and how we as Jews collectively guide our people to be our best, in the best sense of the Jewish tradition, is to be in conversation. What is Torah? Torah, first and foremost, is a prompt for us as a community to debate. For the rabbis of the Talmud, there was no more important question than what are the mitzvot. And when they ask, why is it that Hillel and Shammai, point counterpoint, why is it that Hillel normally wins? The rabbis of the Mishnah said because Hillel would allow Shammai to go first, would repeat what he said before providing his own answer. The ability to hear each other does not mean to agree. The ability to hear each other is the opportunity to see the familiar in fresh ways, which means the opportunity to grow. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic teacher, said, if I am not better tomorrow than I am today, for what do I need tomorrow? And the only way we get better, the only way we become a Talmid Chacham, is to listen. Rabbi, who was not a rabbi, but he was a rabbi, Eli Wiesel, pointed out that in our tradition, a scholar of Talmud is called a Talmid Chacham. Chacham means wise. Wise is the ability to discern what is the better of two options. But he's called a Talmid Chacham, a student who is wise. That in order to grow, in order to become wise, in order to be scholarly about what is most important in life, one must perpetually be a student. And so a plug. First time. Last year, the community engaged in 5 conversations for 5 weeks. The topic last year got launched at Yom Kippur was Becoming Your Best. This year, the topic is Leading a Life of Significance, Why Judaism Matters. I spent my summer putting together the material to enable 5 conversations. From my point of view, what Judaism offers are values, belonging to an extended family, and Torah. They provide a worldview that leads to action, worship, state of Israel, and tikkun olam. Each of these 5 topics is worthy of a conversation with a friend or a group of friends. There are no bottom line yes or no answers to the things that are most important to us. But if Judaism is important in your life, and it's not only for Jews, you can do it with your non-Jewish neighbors, as some of our congregants did, and they don't have to be members of CBI. To participate in a small group for 5 weeks of conversation is the only way to deepen what it means for you to be a Jew. What Jacob demonstrates this morning is what you put in, you get out. Jacob, may you continue to draw from all that you put in. And may we be inspired to put in effort in conversations with friends and spouses and neighbors about who we are and what's important to us. Because in doing so, we become more. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, your Torah is a love letter. Hafech ba v'chuli ba, Ben Bagbag in the Mishnah teaches, turn it over, for all is in it. For what is in it demands turning over, and turning over through conversation, for words matter. May we use our words as if they have weight, as if there are better and worse choices in life, but may we do so as Talmidei Chachamim, as perpetual students. Amen.